Fables of La Fontaine. The Wolf and the Lamb. The reasoning of the strongest has such weight, none can gainsay it, or dare prate, no more than one would question fate. A lamb her thirst was very calmly slaking at the pure current of a woodland rill. A grisly wolf, by hunger urged, came making a tour in search of living things to kill. "How dare you spoil my drink?" he fiercely cried. There was grim fury in his very tone. "I'll teach you to let beasts like me alone." "Let not your majesty feel wrath," replied the lamb, "nor be unjust to me from passion. I cannot, sire, disturb in any fashion the stream which now your royal highness faces. I'm lower down by at least 20 paces. "You spoil it," roared the wolf, "and more I know, you slandered me half a year ago." "But how could I do so, when I was scarcely born?" the lamb replied. "I was a suckling then." "Then 'twas your brother held me up to scorn." "I have no brother." "Well, 'tis all the same. At least 'twas some poor fool that bears your name. You and your dogs, both great and small, your shepherds and sheep, one and all, slander me. If men say but true, and I'll revenge myself on you." Thus saying, he bore off the lamb deep in the wood, far from its dam, and there, not waiting judge nor jury, fell to and ate him in his fury. Well, there you have it. What's this all about? The wolf and the lamb. A lamb was very calm, taking a drink at the river, and the wolf, angry, comes and says, "You're spoiling it. You're kicking up dirt in the stream. How can I drink when you're making such a mess?" And, of course, this was just an excuse. And the lamb, innocent, I didn't do it. Don't just get mad at me because, you're angry. "Well, you slandered me half a year ago." Well, I couldn't do that. So dredging up things from the past that didn't happen. Rewriting history. "Remember when?" And he's like, "Well, that couldn't be me. I wasn't even born then." "Well, it was someone. It was your brother, somebody, but I'll have my revenge on you." Revenge for what? I didn't do anything. Well, this is what happens when you deal with a tyrant. A bully who has power, no real reason for having power. They say absolute power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I believe that's the gist. But this is what happens. When you have power, it's like the Spider-Man quote, "With great power comes great responsibility." Well, what happens when an irresponsible person gets power? What happens when a bully has power over you? Well, this is very interesting because I'm currently dealing with a terrible bully who has incredible power over me, and this is the kind of stuff that goes on. Just being angry and accusing me when I haven't done anything and I'm innocent, and dredging up nonsense from the past that never really happened, rewriting history. When people remember something in the past, the memory is very different from what actually happened. And if you have a very neutral type of memory, but you remember it in a very negative way, then you change the reality. And then if you go around and think about it again in a more negative way, then you overwrite that memory, and now you have an even more negative memory. And if you follow this through and you keep going through that cycle, you can have these terrible memories that are so far from reality that it's based on nothing, but it builds up this anger and resentment and fury over nothing, building a mountain out of a molehill. And the opposite can be true as well. If you have a fairly neutral, basic situation, but then you remember it better than it was, and then you go through the cycle and remember it better than it was, and keep remembering it better than it was, then you can think back and it was a wonderful thing that also has no basis in memory. And it seems in a lot of relationships, a lot of men, and I'm sure some women, but I don't really know from the point of view of women, it seems to me that a lot of women remember it worse than it was to justify the failure of the relationship or whatever, and then they remember it a second time and it's worse, and then it's worse, and then it's worse, and then they think back about what a terrible person this guy was when it's based on nothing in reality. And then a lot of men do the opposite. They think back and they remember the good times, and then they think back again and remember the good times, and then they build up this ideal vision of how it was. Neither one is based on reality. And then they're so far apart, one remembering bad times and one remembering good times, and then reinforcing these memories, and none of them are based on reality. And then you have somebody on one side of the spectrum saying, oh, I wish we could get back together and things were wonderful like they were, when in fact they weren't wonderful. And the other one is like, oh my God, how could I have spent time with this devil, this absolute evil human being, the worst person on the planet? Well, that's not even true. None of that's true. And it seems to me that a lot of men tend to remember things better than they were and kind of long for a reconciliation. And a lot of women remember things worse than they were. Now, I'm sure there are other scenarios where women remember it better than it was and where men remember it worse than it was. It depends on what's motivating you. But anyway, back to this story. The point is, your memory is very malleable and can create all kinds of havoc with false memories. And it's very difficult to keep a grasp on reality. But when you've done nothing wrong and you're dealing with a tyrant and a bully, and they're accusing you of stuff you did, which isn't even true, and they're taking out their anger on you and making mountains out of molehills, and if, say, for instance, you leave a small mess in the kitchen, then they go off the handle. Oh, you're always leaving these terrible messes in the kitchen. Well, no, you're not, because what's going on is something in that person's head. And if they have power over you, you are going to be their victim. And if they can convince courts or their friends and family and everybody of what a terrible person you are, and you haven't done anything, and you're innocent, and now all of a sudden you've got the courts against you, you've got all these people against you, and these people, due to being popular or just talking to anyone who will listen, everybody's turned against you, and your reputation is destroyed, and your life can be destroyed, and things taken away from you, and you don't deserve it, but they've got everybody turned against you, and you have nowhere to go. You've done nothing, and yeah, this is the kind of stuff I'm dealing with right now, and I'm sure some of you out there are dealing with the same thing. And the bully thinks they're winning, and maybe they will win, but as time goes on, maybe some of that power will slip away and situations change, and eventually, hopefully, you can get away from these type of bullies and tyrants and put it in the past and have nothing to do with them in the future. And they have nobody to blame but themselves. But then, of course, they'll remember, oh, why did these people leave me? Now the bully becomes a victim. And a lot of their bullying is based on this victim mentality about how they've been victimized. So now they got the upper hand and they'll teach you and get the revenge. But I've done nothing. You've done it to yourself. Anyway, that's the story of the wolf and the lamb. And I'm sure a lot of you out there are going through something similar. And all you can basically do is hope that truth eventually comes out, and if not, then hopefully the power goes away from the tyrant and the bully, which probably won't happen either. But as time goes by and situations change, hopefully you can get out from under the thumb of these terrible people. Anyway, if you have anything you'd like to add, down below, please. Until next time, goodbye. Love you.